drama.
Hello and welcome to Not a Drama, Just Tech, No Drama. Before getting into the Ryzen 1600 to 3600 update, you will wonder why I am in a kind of like sci-fi bar with a guy flipping a knife. Well, I relocated from Ireland to London, UK, and this is not how my place looks like. Shocker. I actually have a green screen and I have a good home office, and maybe I will do a video about it, but you know, it's easier to create videos if I don't have to tidy up the room, etc. So I will just probably do some of these pixel art loops. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed them, but you probably don't care too much about all of this, so let's move on to my experience upgrading from the 1600 Ryzen 5 to 3600 Ryzen 5. So I did upgrade due to the promising single core performances that were seen also by other reviewers, and especially to play with iRacing, which is a simulator, racing simulator, which is heavily depending on CPU. It's only using 2 cores, so single core performance were crucial to me as an upgrade. So I'm happy with the upgrade, especially considering the CPU is coming at less than 200 pounds. There are 2 minor complaints I will have about the CPU, so you can keep watching if you're interested into that. And after my review, there will also be some gameplay with iRacing in VR on my GTX 1070 Ti using an Oculus Rift CV1, so you can see yourself how the gameplay is and if it's holding the 90 FPS or not. So I'm not a great overclocker or builder expert by any stretch. In fact, I was actually running my RAM at obscene latencies, as I explained in this video that I did a while in the past when I built my new PC. Thanks to a viewer comment, I was able to go from the obscene 22 latency to 16 by bumping the voltages a little more. So take this video with skepticism, and if you know better, hit me up in the comments, please. So this is a simple main review, first impression on updating Ryzen 1600 to 3600. So I was happy that my plan worked out. What was my plan? Well, the fact that AMD promised to maintain this socket, the AM4 and the X370 chipset compatible for new generation of CPUs, and this actually worked out. So I was able to keep my motherboard and just drop in the new CPU. So swapping the old Ryzen out for a new one was fairly frustration free, so changing the whole motherboard would have been a major pain, and as well it would have impacted on the price and not only been 200 pounds. So the first thing I'm actually not happy with it is a bright cooler with the 3600. Now when I unboxed it, I was surprised to see how smaller the packaging was. It's almost half the original one, but when I realized that this was due to the cooler being half the size, almost like 2 centimeters shorter, I was a little bit worried. Due to laziness and time constraint, and you know, I'm not paid to do this unless I get 2,000 subscribers or subscribes, I did not compare the two stock coolers from a performance point of view, but I will be surprised if it performs as well as the original one, being almost half the size. Not a big issue for me. I was using a Cooler Master tower cooler, but still, if you're planning to use the one included in the 3600, think again about it. Maybe if you have a 1600, you may keep the original 1600 one rather than swap it over for the 3600 one. So taking off temperature, I was using this cooler, the Cooler Master one, with the 1600 on the same case, everything the same, and the temps with the 1600s were around 40 degrees Celsius at idle and 78 Celsius under load with Prime. Did a quick test in this hot London summer. So mind though that the 1600 was overclocked at 3.85 megahertz. The 3600 his auto at idle is getting to 40, but it's jumping between 40 and 46 due probably to the boosting on megahertz. I did not overclock it, more on that later. And however, it seems to perform way better under load, being 8 degrees cooler than the 1600, boosting over the 4000 gigahertz mark. So temperature wise, a little bit hotter at idle, but a little bit cooler under load, so I cannot complain too much about that. Now, speaking of frequencies though, because I mentioned that it's boosting at 4000, now the CPU should boost from 3.6 to 4.2. I was not able at all to manually overclock the CPU. Again, every time I was changing the multiplier in my motherboard, it was simply booting up to a black screen, and I have to force the reboot to then end up in the BIOS settings again. Now this can be down to the Asus BIOS, given that CPUs are not out for a while, or my incompetency. So take this with any grain of salt. However, I noticed that by using the default overclock settings available in the Asus BIOS, the CPU is able to jump to 4.2. However, it's not really maintaining it like just for a split second, and then it settled around 4 to 4.1 under load. So performance wise, I did some complete useless benchmark in Heaven, which is stupid because it's really testing mainly GPU and not CPU, and there was barely no difference between the 1600 and the 3600 there, so I won't bother you even showing that information. And again, you may want to look Gamer Nexus if you really want to know about performances with other games. This for me was mainly about iRacing in VR with the CV1. Now, that was again my main reason, right? iRacing in VR, especially given I'm in a waiting list for a index valve, so I wanted to have a more solid CPU to then run with the index. So I did a quick test with the dev tool of Oculus to see if there was any significant improvement using the 3600, and comparing to the 1600, I saw a good performance. With the Oculus, I used the dev tools to check for drop frames, and with the 1600, I had 25% of drop frame in a gaming session. Now, playing under very similar condition with the 3600, I only had 18% of drop frames. So from 25% drop frames to 18% drop frames with the 3600. So a fairly significant improvement. And most of the drop frame were, however, when looking at replays, as I use higher graphics settings for that, so it's always hitting the retro projection in the Oculus Rift. Now, I'm happy to report that iRacing performs significantly better with the 3600, holding on 90 FPS most of the time and quite consistently. Now, there were some dips here and there, especially given some of the tracks in iRacing are not so optimized, but the main thing is that there was no perceivable stuttering. So it was having quick drops but no stutter. So if it wasn't for the FPS counter, I wouldn't even notice that the drops were actually indeed happening. Now, the only exception about actually the 90 FPS was when I tested the Spa at night with headlights in an online session with more than 20 cars around the track, but that is probably due to my GPU, my 1070 Ti, not really coping with the headlights. Now the FPS was most of the time at 45 FPS due to the retro projection of the Rift. So yeah, that's not great, but I probably should try to remove the retro projection and see what I get. But the main point is that even at 45 FPS, the gameplay was very smooth. I was not perceiving any latency, and there was no any stuttering. So hope this will help you in deciding if it's worth it to upgrade from the 1600 to the 3600. I believe that yes, it's actually worth it, especially considering a £200 price, and there you go, you just drop it into your motherboard. Now you can keep watching to see some iRacing gameplay with the FPS counter, so you can judge yourself if the gameplay is smooth enough for you. And don't judge my driving, okay? We're just looking at the FPSs. That's my excuse. Now, so enjoy the gameplay and consider subscribing to help the channel. And see you in the next one. later.